Apparently, some of the oxygen on Earth is actually leaving the atmosphere, and they're saying some of it goes to the moon. Like there's some kind of a hole in the ozone layer that the oxygen is leaking out of. So in the future, Earth's oxygen level might drop dramatically.
Oh, okay. But do you know why it won't drop dramatically? Is because we have so many trees and plants.
I don't know
Um,
about that, Dave. They're cutting those things down in abundance.
yeah, it depends if they start cutting down too many, then it might get out of balance. Um, but but if it continues as it is and they don't cut down trees, then it'll remain stable for the rest of its life because God made it this way. God balanced
Ish.
the gases in the atmosphere. He made sure that they was perfect for human life. So,
If the moon had an atmosphere, maybe some of that oxygen that's leaving Earth's atmosphere could be breathable for humans, since a little bit of oxygen reaches the moon, apparently.
what are you saying that if the moon had oxygen, it could send oxygen to the Earth?
Well, the
So,
scientists just announced that some of Earth's oxygen actually does reach the moon, apparently, because of that hole in the ozone layer. If the moon had an atmosphere, maybe it would be able to hold some of that oxygen.
but I'm wondering, does the moon send things to Earth? That would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, all the time.
I don't know if
Little
the moon would
tiny chunks of
send.
rock and stuff sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
There's
I don't know
actually a
if.
theory that Earth got here because, like, since Mars and Earth are so similar with the oceans and water Mars used to have, there's a theory that like a huge asteroid hit Mars and part of Mars broke up and merged with Earth a little bit.
Part of Mars broke up and merged with Earth a little bit. Um, I don't know. I mean, you know when you look at Mars, it looks perfectly circly, so I don't even know. I don't think.
Although there is something very suspicious about Mars.
Uh,
NASA, they have these simulations in a part of Canada where hardly anyone lives. It's like a desert area. There's a small part in Canada with deserts. And a lot of the Mars photos look like they were taken from the set in that Canadian place, Dave. Like they have a little simulation set with rovers and stuff in the desert. And people
hmm.
have compared it on YouTube, photos of Mars, and it looks like
Wow.
NASA might actually be taking Mars photos here on Earth, Dave. It's pretty trippy.
Well, this is why I am so concerned because all of these explorations could be fake. You know, every single one of them could be
Yeah,
fake.
if God didn't intend for us to leave Earth, it's not gonna happen, Dave.
No, and obviously we know that they have a space station in space. Obviously, that's obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, you can see it with the telescope, but you don't actually know if humans are actually aboard that space station.
No,
It could just
it's
be
weird.
like a huge piece of metal that they have there, and they just say that astronauts live there, but I don't
Yeah,
know, Dave. It
because
rotates at like 15,000 miles an hour. That would be pretty
yeah,
hard on any human being.
how could they actually get to the space station if it's moving at a massive speed? I don't think it'd be possible, would it?
Yeah,
Um,
there's a whole lot of questionable things that they say about outer space.
yeah.
Like apparently, like all the photos they have of other planets are computer generated images, CGI, that they say that the rovers get when they send these probes. CGI, Dave.
But what is CGI?
You know, like those special effects they put in movies, computer images generated.
What do you reckon? Do you reckon they're not actually giving us true images?
Uh, the only thing I would say that's legit is probably the photos of Earth, because they can actually send satellites above Earth, but I don't know,
Mm,
getting a photo 80 million miles away from Mars, there's gonna be a delay of minutes for those photos just to even transmit. Like, just the astronauts supposedly communicating from the moon back to Earth takes about 10 seconds. So how the hell are they gonna
um,
get photos of Mars when it's 90 million miles away, Dave?
um, well, I think Mars is so far. I mean, it's at least 150 million miles away. Um, it's it, it's a hell of a lot further than the moon. I don't believe that I don't believe they've actually gone there.
Well, you know, the thing about those spaceships, the rockets, is they're very unsafe. Back in the 60s, they didn't even know if it would be possible to send someone to the moon because it was so dangerous.
No, I mean, I believe what you're saying, bro. I think it's too dangerous to go there. Um, but also, bro, also, how hard? I don't know. How hard would it be to land on the moon? Because,
Seriously, like flying a kite.
if the moon is orbiting around the Earth, I don't know how you land on the moon. Um,
Apparently, they had these experimental craft in the 1940s and 50s, Dave, that use anti-gravity.
um,
Flying saucers is what they call them.
well, it's allegedly they did that, but don't know if it
One
did.
crashed at Roswell, 1947, Dave.
I don't think they are telling the truth. And the horrifying thing about all of this is, imagine if they are lying about cancer.
Oh yeah.
Could you imagine if they were lying about cancer, bro? Think
Apparently,
of,
they've had a cure for like 40 or 50 years, but they won't release it to the public.
nope, they won't because power, sorry, knowledge is power. They won't release it. I believe they do have a cure for cancer, and my friend died of cancer. I am not happy.
What it really comes down to is greed, because these hospitals would go out of business if they released the cure for cancer instead of charging $10,000 for the cancer treatment. Apparently, this cancer can be treated literally for hundreds of dollars, Dave. But they won't release that because these hospitals want to make money.
Exactly, you've smashed it. You have smashed the nail to bits. It's a really detailed topic. Where why we didn't go to the moon. But as I was saying before, I was talking to Slender, and he was saying that there's a lot of evidence that they didn't go to the moon, and it doesn't. There isn't a tiny bit of evidence that they didn't go. There's a lot of a lot of evidence that they didn't go to the moon, and one of them was how come on the pictures that the NASA provided, and they showed pictures of the spacecraft on the moon, but when they put the American flag in the when they planted the American flag on the
Oh
moon,
yeah, it was blowing in
uh,
the wind, even though there's supposedly no wind up there.
yeah, and that is why I am very suspicious as to why it was blowing.
I think the
Uh,
official story is that like astronauts had air conditioning in their suits or whatever to keep cool, and maybe that's why the flag might have been blowing or something like that. I don't know.
yeah, but the air couldn't have actually been. The air had to stay in the suit, because if it didn't stay in the suit, it'd die. So how could?
Well, this actually branches into another conspiracy, Dave. People on YouTube actually say that they've been lying to us about the moon, and just like Earth, it has an atmosphere, and there's actually oxygen on the moon, and that a lot of the footage that they showed us of the moon was fake because they didn't want the people to know that they're well, at least Germany. They were experimenting in the 40s. They were trying to build crafts to go to the moon themselves. So if NASA would have shown the live video footage, theoretically the Germans might have actually been the first to reach the moon and not America, Dave. Their
I
space
think
program.
I think that I think the moon. To be honest with you, I don't think it has an atmosphere. Um, for example, when you stand on the moon, um, from the knowledge that I've acquired, when you stand on the moon, you don't see a blue sky. You actually see a quite a different picture compared to Earth. What you would see is you would see a black sky, and because there's no atmosphere to block the stars' light.
There was no
When you
stars
stood
in the photos, Dave.
when you stood on the moon, all you would see was the Milky Way, and it would cover the whole sky. You would see the Milky Way in a line going across the sky. You would see the descent of the Milky Way, the bulge in the middle, and you would think that would be like the most brilliant sight because on
You're saying
Earth,
that the Milky Way wears Speedos, Dave?
yes, how wonderful would that be, bro? To see the Milky Way naked, almost.
Oh
Um,
my days.
and so, if we did go to the moon, they would need
Is the Milky Way
oxygen.
wearing some panties, Dave?
They couldn't land on the moon and try to go without oxygen because they would die because there's no oxygen on the moon and there's not even any air on the moon. And so they would be dead in seconds. And don't know if they needed a backup backup system or on the on the rig. I'm not even sure, bro. But
Well, supposedly the reason like all the moon footage looks fake is because uh they might have actually gone to the moon, but they faked the video footage because they didn't want people to see that there's literally cities up there, Dave. There's all kinds of man-made structures.
that's
These
interesting.
of these, and
So
what they actually said was, the craters from the meteorites impacting the moon. They soon found out, Dave, that those craters were actually a parked spaceship on the moon, basically, Dave. Those
hmm.
flying saucers are on the moon. SpaceX has just announced that in 2020 or 2021, it'll be the first private mission to the moon. A big block of cheese lit up in the sky.
Do you want me to carry on?
Well, the question is, if the government couldn't get to the moon in the 60s, how could a private space company do it now?
You know,
Oh,
that is a really, really good point, bro, because like you said, if they are so if they were special then and they did so much then why aren't they special now? Why don't they do special things now? So
well, SpaceX is a different. The technology they use is pretty advanced. Like, they're building rockets that can be refilled instead of using one rocket. Mid-flights, the rocket can be refilled. And the unique thing about SpaceX is the rockets can land vertically at different angles as opposed to the rockets from the 60s.
and so this is like
I
what
mean,
is this?
Elon
Is this
Musk is a pretty intelligent fella. You know, he's built that company Tesla cars that run on electricity.
yeah.
So I guess the
Um
question is, Dave, do you have faith that Elon Musk can take humans to the moon in 2020?
I hmm, I don't know because the biggest challenge I think is um, the way that they will have to synchronize the speed of the spacecraft according to the planet's orbit and the moon's orbit. And I think that is pretty much impossible because can you remember when they launched in 1977? They launched the Voyager 1 and 2 spacecrafts. Uh, those probes, they launched them. Then the only way that they could get those probes out of our solar system and past some of the major planets in our um, solar system is the only way they could do that is by a planetary alignment. And the only way that they could do that mission in 1977 was as if those planets lined up, and they did. those planets lined up. The reason they knew that they'd line up because the solar system's planets are moving in clockwork order. NASA knew exactly when these planets would line up, and because they knew that, that is why they decided to launch that particular probe into orbit, and the mission was a success. They actually launched the Voyager 1 and 2, and it was a success. They they achieved their goals. They 1 and 2 went in different trajectories. They number 1 achieved its goal, and number 2 did too, and they kind of went on different trajectories, but each one achieved their goal. But I think that is one of the biggest achievements from NASA, in my opinion. I
So
think that
putting those
I,
rovers in the
I,
orbit.
yeah, I think that these voyages that got sent out, I think that is NASA's greatest achievement, and I think that the landing on the moon was too far. It was too big of a challenge, and they couldn't have done it. I don't think they have the technology in back in the day, you know. And but I do think they did these Voyager spacecrafts. I think they were true, but it's a shame that they had to lie about this moon landing, because
Well, if you
it
think
would have
about it,
been
Dave,
great.
if there were aliens on the moon, NASA wouldn't have told us about it.
Um, to be honest with you, I think that there was. Well, no. What I think is, according to my belief, I believe that NASA didn't find any buildings, but I believe they did a hoax because they wanted to earn money off the taxman, according to you.
Some aspects of it's like the probes, the Voyagers, those are probably legit, but I have some
Yes.
questions about the official moon landing, you know?
Yes. Moon landings, yes. Because there's so many ways that it could have failed with the moon landing. There's so many ways it could have failed, but with the Voyager probes,
Did you know
there's
that
not
they
as
actually put a monkey into space? The Russians were the first to put a monkey in a rocket, apparently in a spaceship, Dave.
well. I think they did this because they were trying to work out. They was using the monkey as an experiment, I think. And
You know what they concluded? That going to the moon was too dangerous for humans. That's what the
well, after
Russians concluded.
the experiment,
I think so. And the thing about
well,
Russia at the time, they were more advanced in uh, outer space. They were the first country to put one of those probes in Earth's orbit. They were literally like 10 years ahead of America in the 1950s, I think. So the real question is, Dave, if the Russians were more advanced in space technology, how did America, in only about 8 or 9 years, surpass them? And I mean, just developing the technology takes maybe a decade.
hmm,
And at that point, we couldn't even build a Voyager, a probe. So how the hell
hmm.
did they build a rocket so quickly in 10 years and send someone to the moon, Dave, if the Russians' technology was more advanced than America's at the time for space travel.
It was more advanced at the time. Russian was more advanced. That is a really good question. Uh, I would
I think the
I would
Russians
say
concluded that outer space was just too dangerous for humans to fly.
maybe like you just said, maybe Russia abandoned space exploration because it was too dangerous, and then America carried on researching. You know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And America basically studied more, and uh, Russia was using their intelligence, and they decided not to because it was too dangerous. But what I do know about the moon's surface is, you know, it might be you might go from an oven, and from the oven you could go in. You don't actually go into the freezer though, because on the moon, when you're
Are you
say
saying the
basic.
astronauts had early access to toasting Subway sandwiches, Dave, on the moon? I
No,
could
no, no, no,
take
no.
some bread and salami.
Well,
That would be perfectly oven toasted.
oh, I know what you're saying now. I know what you're saying, bro. Um, well, basically, if they did take some salami, they would have a very nice toasted salami meal. um, but if they had a bag of meat, raw meat, they could preserve it on the moon. um, but
Some hungry astronauts up there.
you have to make sure that when they do keep the raw meat, they keep the raw meat on the shadow side because you know you'd need to, it would basically not be very tasty if they left the meat on the bright side of the moon. It would be very untasty because it would taste like a bag of shit, basically. So
You think that they could take a KFC to the moon, Dave? Nice drive-through KFC floating 10 feet in the air.
they could do, but you know, I think KFC in space would actually taste better because you'd actually you'd be enjoying the scenery while eating the meal. So you'd enjoy it more, wouldn't you? um,
Yeah.
as for KFC, I'm not a great fan, you know. I understand that they use the kind of worst ingredients that you can imagine, and we all
I
know
mean
that.
antibiotics that they put in their chicken.
I didn't know that. I did not know that, bro. If they are feeding the chicken antibiotics, I suppose that would end up in our bodies.
She drive through somehow on the moon's surface.
Yes, it would be
Wait a minute,
very.
that would be a problem because there's like no plumbing in space. Uh-oh.
It would be a very interesting scene because you would
Dave, does that mean
have.
buckets of KFC shits would be flung down at the earth from afar?
We would have basically a KFC, and people in the KFC would be alive because they have oxygen in the KFC, but people outside wouldn't have oxygen. And KFC tends to produce a lot of shit, and so And so, if you did put a KFC on the moon, you would get a lot of shit landing on the Earth. It would go into orbit around the Earth, and then eventually it would hit somebody on the head on Earth. I don't know who it would hit. Don't know if it would land on a KFC studio. Don't know. But it's having KFC on the moon is a very optimistic idea. I think if
You think
NASA
it's
can,
possible to put a dome on the moon, Dave? Like that movie Total Recall, a glass dome, maybe a plastic dome, so people could
yeah,
live up there.
they could actually do that. If they did make a dome, but how would they fix the dome to the moon? That is a question. You know, it's
In the
it's a very
1940s, the government was planning on installing a moon base. If that was in the 1940s, they've probably already done it by now.
yes, but they said a lot of bloody things in those days, but they never came true. And if they did come true, they just made it up. They made it up, bro. People
One
in
of the one of the things they say is proof of landing on the moon is that if you look through a telescope, you can see this reflector of light through this material they put on the moon. Do you know the blueprints that we could start making this spaceship, Dave?
well, I do have an idea. To be honest with you, I haven't really looked into this topic. Um, but if you give me about 155 years, I may be able to formulate a solution to our moon adventure. So,
Tricky part is
mate,
building the engine. It's gonna take a lot of
yes,
thought.
I think we could get there within 10 years, but we need a lot of technology. And so, is 150 years, does that sound alright to you?
Dave, it's a lot of work. A trip to the moon only
Yes.
takes 2 or 3 days.
Yes, maybe we are getting ahead of ourselves, maybe. I don't really know, Carmine, but I I want to get to the moon as soon as possible.
Think about the risk of the first astronauts. It was a very big risk. Getting back to the Earth, they didn't know if those rockets would be able to take off a second time. And it's not like they could have just built another rocket. I think it takes a few months to assemble a new rocket. So the
Uh,
question is, Dave, do you think NASA would have risked their astronauts being stranded up there in the first place? They didn't even have a
um,
backup rocket, Dave.
well, I've heard a lot of bloody bullshit about this pod thing. I've heard that these bloody, you know, NASA colleagues, I believe that they get back to the Earth in a pod, but I think it's a load of baloney, to be honest with you.
Yeah, those
Um,
escape pods that they had in the early 60s, uh, they would always crash all the time.
and the reason I believe it's a lot of baloney is when the shuttle enters the Earth's atmosphere, it's
It's
going to
very
hit some.
dangerous.
Yes. When it hits the atmosphere, it suddenly encounters friction, and the shuttle, it can heat up to something around 5,000 degrees. And so if the shuttle heats up to 5,000 degrees, that is that is hot enough to melt metal, you know. And so
Was it the shuttle that they actually came back to Earth in, or was it like those little dinky pods that they
yeah,
that where they land in the ocean or something like
well,
this?
Carmine, from what I heard, Carmine, they came back from the space station by via a shuttle. No, sorry, a pod. This little pod, a little tiny
Oh.
pod that
Mhm.
holds two people, and when they come to
Mhm.
the Earth's atmosphere, they have to survive 5,000 degrees. Can you imagine the heat?
Is there even
Oh,
a material that we could make on Earth that could withstand that heat, Dave?
nope, because lead melts at below 1,000 degrees, and then iron melts at 1,500, and so you need a metal that melts. Is that the melting point must be at least 6,000, and so you're not gonna get a space pod that can withstand the Earth's atmosphere. And so I don't know what NASA is thinking, but they have some very strange ideas. Um, and
I think the
even after
conclusion
that,
that we get from this discussion is outer space is just too dangerous for humans to go through.
yes. And when the shuttle, after it has received that massive temperature, the parachute has to come out, and then when the parachute comes out, could you imagine all the heat that is on the pod? Wouldn't that melt the parachute? That would melt it, wouldn't it? And
Probably.
so, because the chute has to be made of cotton, because if it isn't, then if it isn't made of cotton, then what's it made of? Is it made of carbon?
Well, there is some reports, Dave, that going back to 1947, that the the UFO that crashed at Roswell, New Mexico, they reverse engineered some of those parts, and it is possible that maybe that alien, spaceship that crashed, maybe they took some of that material and they put it into their own rocket, and it's was able to withstand the heat at re-entry back there, Steve.
um, well, that was a very, very good idea, Carmine. But what I think of this is, do you know why I kind of believe what you're saying is because in 19, 1914, um, a very big event happened in Russia. I don't know who heard of it, but
Are you talking about Tunguska, Dave?
yeah, yeah. And that event was the most epic, magnificent, unusual event that has ever happened on this earth. Because in a normal explosion, the the objects surrounding the explosion would 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 be destroyed in a certain way. But when they examined the objects around the explosion, they
They
noticed
never
that
found that meteorite that exploded, Dave. That's very
nope.
strange.
And what they noticed was the object that was blown over, they was not blown over in a normal way of an explosion. They was blown over
Oh,
in see
you
they
saying it
believe
was an
it's
alien craft, Dave?
they believe it was a supernatural explosion because there was no evidence of the rock that came to the earth. There was no evidence of it being explosives. And there was no evidence that this was a man-made incident,
The
and so
amazing
they
part was
believe.
there was no human life lost because it exploded in a forest where 250 miles were just obliterated of trees. All the trees were
Yeah,
obliterated.
and
But
this is
somehow
why
this meteorite missed like a population. According to ufologists, that meteorite was headed towards like the place where humans lived in Tunguska. An alien craft intervened and directed that meteorite out of harm's way into the forest.
when was the last time since Adam and Eve? When was the last time a whole population got wiped out by a meteorite? You tell me this. You tell me this,
Uh,
Carmine. You tell me this
Never, but
now.
it did. A meteorite did come pretty close in 2014 in Russia. It's on YouTube. You can see this meteorite
Yes.
in the sky above Russians where they were driving.
Yes. But the thing is, Carmine, we hear
Apparently, it
of
shook a lot of people's houses.